Welcome back to the 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show. My name is Wayne Kimmel, managing partner of 76 Capital, the sports tech venture capital company. On this show, I interview top sports entrepreneurs, athletes, and executives who are shaping and many times changing the sports business industry. You can subscribe to our show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our 76 Capital website. Today, my guest is Tim McDermott. Tim is the president of the Philadelphia Union, overseeing all of the Union's business operations, all of their teams and clubs and academy, Subaru Park, and all their development projects. And there's so much for us to talk about, and I'm super excited to have you on the show. Tim, welcome to our 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I was wondering if I'd ever make it this far in my career, so this is a highlight for me.
Well, I didn't know if you ever wanted to come on because you're a big deal, here in the sports industry, and certainly, I mean, look, you've done incredible things in really building the Philadelphia Union, and you should be certainly proud of everything you've done. And I think one of the things I'd love to dive in first in what you've done at the Union is really the importance that you and ownership have really placed on the youth side of things, and what you've done there, and really led the charge across not only MLS, but quite frankly, in sports. So talk a little bit about what you've done there and what's happening.
Yeah. So I it's important. I think first, appreciate all the things you said. I want to make sure I give credit to the people that came, before me and, started the franchise and got the organization up and running, because that was certainly an amazingly hard thing to do. And so, they deserve a lot of credit for sure. Hopefully, since I've been here, we've been able to, continue to grow and, foster, fandom in the area, in the region. And to that end, you asked about then the youth side of things. And that is a really big piece of our strategy, particularly on the soccer side. Really, we've been recognized as being the #1 youth academy in North America. And again, giving credit where credit's due, Steve Graham, Richie Graham, really kind of had the idea, 10 plus years ago at this point in time, of how something like this in the United States could work. They had experience with it, not just from overseas experience in the football soccer community, but having grown up in a ski academy in the United States, they kind of understood, taking the best of the best from that. So this started, 10 plus years ago. And I'll be honest, at the time, it was probably heavily debated. Would it work? Could it work? Conceptually, I think most people thought, the resources in the United States are here. Parents, et cetera, are pretty fired up about making sure their kids have the best development system. The professionalization of youth sports was booming, and obviously still is booming. The business of youth sports. So there's always been this feeling that there's a lot of opportunity for the youth sector in the United States to become top tier talent in the sport of soccer. And so that was, the premise of this is if you put all the right ingredients with the right coaching, the right structure, you paid for everything, brought any of those barriers down, and provided this, amazing, top-notch, world-class experience with the training, the development, the nutrition, the sport, the science, and the school, that you could really create something special. So we did that, over, like I said, 10 years ago, and it's now produced amazing, top-end talent for us, talent that's playing for the Philadelphia Union or has played for the Union, has now gone to leagues in Europe. And, the pipeline is really bright for us. And then, with that, then is the scouting that goes into it locally, nationally. We have residency. We have a private school that is, second to none. All, recruiting tools, quite frankly, to get that talent to come to us. Then you got to have a coach and coaches that all speak the same language, which all of our coaches kind of use the same style of play, the same vernacular. We're all, and then the interchangeable parts aspect of it becomes really important. So our U15 coach could coach the U17s, and et cetera. And then you have to have a top coach, a Philadelphia Union coach that's willing to play the players and make sure that they have playing time. And that ultimately, that brings everybody up and allows you at some point in time then to, sell those players to other to other leagues and kind of do it again. So that was a big, that's the way in theory it's supposed to work. We've been one of the ones that have been able to capitalize on it and make it really successful. It's an amazing environment, and a very special environment. And that's kind of what we rewind the clock about 7+ years ago now. This was all in the works, and we felt like we could double down on this if we could create a sportsplex type environment that had first team, second team, academy, the school all together. And that is now, just opened this 2 weeks ago in the WSFS Bank Sportsplex, where we have everybody in one. It's 170,000 square feet facility, 7 outdoor fields, an indoor field that's full air conditioned, heated, 2 basketball courts, two-story weightlifting center, cafe, 6 locker rooms, recovery center, a striker lab, and a whole bunch of other things. And it's for first team, second team, academy, but it's also for the community, which was a big piece, making sure that we do something that I think is pretty unusual, being able to take these professional facilities and use them for these professional athletes and our young kid athletes, but also for the public, also for the Chester community. So that's the piece that I think is a little bit of a unique twist and all. But yeah, I appreciate your nod. The youth strategy is definitely a big piece of what makes us different, what makes us unique in the MLS system.
Now, it makes you different, certainly in MLS, but also truly here in the U.S. across all sports. I mean, if you ever sort of sat back and, I mean, you're a multi-sport guy. We can get into that. You've done so many. You've played and you've been involved with so many different leagues. But you ever wonder why the only place that this is really happening right now is around MLS?
Yeah, I ask myself a lot, often that very, question. It's interesting because in football, as an example, you don't really see something like this, or, really any sport where you see it, of this nature, where you're really seeking out, recruiting, 12-year-old kids, 13-year-old kids, 14-year-old kids to come into a pipeline, into a system, I should say, developmental system. And it's a good question. Is it just a matter of, this is a soccer specific thing that in Europe has been around for quite some time and is now kind of working its way this way? Is it a factor of when development happens with soccer? Is it earlier because it's a foot skill? Is there pieces like that? And I'd say the other piece to it is just the way you trade players, right? The way you can kind of retain their player rights, and you want to get those kids into your player system, retain those player rights, and then be able to, sell on those players. Obviously this is a new concept in the United States, call it, 10 years old or so. I personally believe that for soccer to really have a true acceleration path in the United States, that the U.S. men's national team needs to become a perennial top 5 type team. And if that happens, then you're going to see them covered more in traditional media, in sports media, on the ESPNs of the world, and so on and so forth. And I think there's a major trickle effect to that, when that happens, because then the kids are buying the gear. There's more social currency about being a fan of the sport, fan of the union, et cetera, fan of the U.S. men's national team. And so I'm a big believer that for soccer to really catapult, we need that to happen. We need the U.S. men's national team to be, that top 1 through 5 and hopefully 1. And the way, in my opinion, to help do that is to create these youth systems early on. And so I think we've done a nice job. The union has. I think there's a few other teams in the MLS who've also, have done this. I think our next step, though, is we need to broaden it, right? We need a broader canvas of kids from a larger, probably socioeconomic region, demographics, to become ingrained in the sport of soccer, participate in the sport of soccer. And I think if we can capture that next audience of kids early on, then again, I think we take another catapult effect, because that will certainly help us. When I say us, help the U.S. men's national team. So if we have some of these kids that maybe would go down a path of American football or American baseball, basketball, and we can put them into a soccer path, I think that overall, athleticism will spike, and you're going to have a lot more success. So that's probably the next wave, I think. And we gotta like really think through as an MLS enterprise, like how do we do that? What does that look like to do that?
I mean, it's really impressive, the names of a number of the players that have come through your system, and are playing with you now, playing around the world. A number of them hopefully will play on the USA team coming up. That must be really, exciting and gratifying for you and the whole organization.
Yeah. I mean, at this point in time, we've had a lot of players that we've signed to professional contracts. A lot of them, like you mentioned, have now gone on to play in Europe, and they'll hopefully be on the U.S. men's national team. So if we can have 3, 4, 5 players on that team representing us in the World Cup in 26 or 2030, that we hope that that's going to be a good, again, trickle effect back to the Philadelphia Union. The World Cup coming in 26 here, so we're less than a year away now. But we've got a work cut out for us of how do we as the Philadelphia Union, how do we as the MLS enterprise kind of make sure that we're part of that World Cup ecosystem as it comes here. The last thing we want this to do is just be a big, big party, big event, and it crescendos and then goes down really quickly. We need to make sure that the union brand, the players, the coaches, the MLS brand is integrated into all of the World Cup as it comes. So whether that's our players, coaches being on TV in our local market, in the Philadelphia market, acting as credibility, talent on TV broadcasts, helping people to educate them, about the World Cup. What are they looking for? What should they know about the World Cup, the players? So we need to make sure that we're kind of in that ecosystem. And then also I'll tell you that another big one that we've been talking a lot about is in the youth side of things, going back to that, is the youth soccer participation. We know in 1994, when the World Cup came to the United States, youth soccer participation spiked, but it went up, and then a few years later kind of came back down. So the question is, what's different now? Like, how do we take advantage of that now? We have better facilities, better fields, better youth structure, better coaches. We have, we didn't even have an MLS, that back then really. So there's a lot more in place. So the hope is, as this, if it truly does spike again, that we can take advantage of that as an MLS enterprise and as a local, Philadelphia Union team. So we're spending some time just trying to think through, like, what does it look like coming, out now or into, during, and out of the World Cup, so that from a youth soccer participation, we're capturing more of those hearts and minds of those that are playing soccer.
Well, we're already seeing Alejandro Bedoya, out there as one of the faces of Philadelphia's effort with FIFA and everything that's been happening there. So it's great to see him out there. I mean, are those the types of things you're looking, to do more of? Yeah.
So it's take what Alejandro's been doing and now take it, times 10 with all of our other players. And like I said, some coaches and, whether it be ownership, general manager, myself, whatever, and get us onto the various, media outlets locally, regionally. I think there's going to be, whether it be the CBS, NBC, Fox, ESPN, Philly Sports, whatever, they're going to need people who can kind of talk the talk. And certainly our folks can be, helpful in that. So yes, that piece of it for sure. So yeah, it's a really, hallmark moment that is going to happen for I think the MLS with World Cup coming. But I don't think we want to sit around and just say, because it's happening, therefore we don't need to do anything. We need to make sure that we're really proactive and being thoughtful, of really strategic about how we're going to take advantage of the situation.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is going to be a huge event for the country, for North America in general, but from a sports and soccer perspective, it's just going to be gigantic. And for you, from a business perspective, and that's your world, right? That's your part of the world. What are some of the things that you think will be able to will truly be enhanced because of because of this? I mean, because of the, is it the teams coming and playing in your, and practicing and staying in Philly and the games there? Like, what are some of the things you think are going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, look, yes, all those things are certainly going to happen, right? So we're going to be a training site or a base camp for, an international, country club to be here. And so there's a spotlight from that perspective. There's a spotlight on the city of Philadelphia, and how does it do in the hosting of an international event like this, which it'll do amazing. They've got an incredible track record of doing these sorts of things. So those to me are kind of the easy layups. The city of Philadelphia will shine bright. Our ability to handle logistics and event management, we're good at that. We as a city, the Eagles, Lincoln Financial Field, Subaru Park, we're all pretty, well versed in that side of things. So I think that's going to be, good for everybody, good for the city. But like I said earlier, I think this is going to be, an opportunity for real growth for the league, or should be, or could be, if we're really, sophisticated and strategic about what that looks like. The one thing that, we have to be, careful of, I guess, is, as what I don't want to have happen is the World Cup comes, or even this past, Club World Cup comes, and Club World Cup comes, and there's 8 teams in the market, or 8 games, excuse me, in the market with some really significant brands, which is great. But at the same time, I think we have to be thoughtful of, like, how does our brand rise to the top? And not everybody agrees with me when I say this, and that's certainly, I'm not saying I'm the expert in this, but maybe coming from other leagues where I only root for the the Eagles, or I only root for the Phillies, or only root for the Sixers, right? Flyers. In the world of soccer, at least today in the United States, you see a lot of people who might root for, in our case, the Union, but they might have a team that they also root for overseas. And this is where I might be a little bit different than maybe what other people think. And again, I'm not saying I'm right, but I want as much share of eyeball, mind, wallet, fandom to the Union. And your heart only has so much space. You can only date so many girls, right? So, I want everybody to be a Union first type person, type customer, type fan. And ultimately, like I've said, and I've said this before to other people, like, to the extent I want the Philadelphia Union and the MLS to compete and be seen as good as any of those teams or leagues out there. And today, I would tell you, when you look at the bottom tier of the Premier League, the MLS can compete with the bottom tier of the Premier League. Now, not the top, right? The resources that the top, 5, 6, 10 have are crazy big, right, at the moment. But that should be our aspiration is, hey, I want to go head to head, toe to toe with all of the Premier League teams. And I want to beat them on the pitch. And I want to beat them off the pitch. And that's the type of people that I want here. That's the type of people I hope the MLS has working for them. That's the type of people that I want in our environment, our players, our coaches. And so this isn't, there's a point in time like today, I think a lot of people see the league and team, the MLS as we do this and we do this well. And then I go to Europe. And I get that. I do get that today. But at some point in time, I want that to stop. I want people to say, I want to stay here. I want to play for the Union. I want to play in the MLS, and I want to be the best. And I'm going to be the best, right? I'm going to be the Pele, and I'm going to be here, and I don't need to go anywhere else to do it. And so I'm excited for that day, to happen. And so that's my approach, my vision, my hope. And I want people to swing for the fence like that. And that's what I want. I want, more eyeballs, more share of wallet, more fans thinking about the Philadelphia Union. And again, it's not a knock on any other team, not a knock on another club or somebody, another league from another, country. It's just, that's the way I feel like we need to make it happen in the United States.
I love it. I love it. That's how I feel. And that's what I tell people, but they tell me I don't understand the game. And I say, well, no. I said, what's the difference? I said, we're all humans, right? They just happen to live in a different place. And why can't we train as well, use better technology? You better, figure out ways to make the, our players here in the US just as good, or they don't even have to be from the US, just the league, right? The league in general. I mean, it could be the place to play. And yeah. I think that, I agree with you. Let me ask a question, getting some, talking more about like maybe the technology that you use, to not only just for, on the pitch, and for the player's perspective. But what about the use of technology from a business perspective and making sure that you can have a really great fan experience, and people just coming away from going to a Union game and like saying that was an amazing, I got to come back.
Yeah. So I think first I'd say when I think about that kind of the innovation in tech is, it certainly made its way through our organization on the soccer side and what we do with data analytics, tech. I would put us in that group of trying to be on the front edge of the use of these things and trialing some of these things. And some of them work, and some of them we go, we tried it and maybe it didn't work so well, or something better has come up. So we try to be that that sort of a organization. We're really big on finding the proverbial 1%, 2% to make us better. And looking for those little unique edges and trying things. The example that I know our owner always uses, and sometimes this resonates, sometimes it doesn't, but he's always been really big on the concept of throw-ins in soccer. And maybe one of the least practiced pieces of the sport is to practice throw-ins. But then he'd always be like, well, if you can throw the ball in and you can complete the throw-in a higher percentage of time and retain possession, isn't that a good thing? Or if you can throw the ball in on a long throw into the box, isn't that a good thing, right? So I think it's like little things like that we're always trying to challenge ourselves with, of being able to think, okay, well, what if we just looked at this slightly different, slightly in a unique way, and is there something there? So we're generally designed that way. I think most of the people that are working here are trying to have a thought process like that. And of course, like we use a lot of tech like others do, whether it be, wearables, whether it be, tracking and everything in the sports science side of things. Like we're doing a lot of that stuff as well. One of the things that we're also going to be rolling out here in the near term, as we just are finishing the Sportsplex, the WSFS Bank Sportsplex, is what we call a striker lab. And the idea behind the striker lab is similar to what some may have seen with the Wake Forest pitching lab, where they got a lot of notoriety for creating this innovative pitching lab space where it uses cameras and technology to help a pitcher improve velocity or whatever, their biomechanics, physics, etc. Using that same concept in the sport of soccer, right? So how do you bend a ball? How do you go up and over somebody? How do you get the ball to to curve a little bit more, a little bit less? The pinpoint accuracy of being able to strike a ball is critically important. So we're basically doing the same thing with cameras and computers and technology, and that'll be up and running here in about the next month. So that's a good example, I think, of the way that we're trying to think about it. Obviously we're investing a lot of capital into doing this, and we think there's something there from that perspective.
Well, I mean, I think how is your sort of the day-to-day, and how do you manage today the operations? I mean, like, how many people are now sort of underneath your umbrella? I mean, when you it's, again, you go all the way down to the academy level, right? And then it's game day staff. And is this something that you were, I guess, when you originally kind of took the job here after being in other sports, it was like, this is way bigger operation than anything you ever were involved with before.
It's interesting. I think on the surface, people probably go, you're the president of Philadelphia Union. What probably is not as transparent is, you have the Union, you have Union 2, you have Academy, you have, in our case, we have the Union Power Plant with there's 12 tenants and 450,000 square feet of space. We have the WSFS Bank Sportsplex, which is its own entity and own P&L, and we have Subaru Park. So yeah, it's probably fair to say that I think under the umbrella of what we call Union Sports Entertainment, there's probably more to it than meets the eye, and maybe more to it than, if you're just working at, a team or a club that just operates a team or club, right? Like there's one thing, they're responsible for one P&L. Now that P&L may be a lot bigger, right? That's the difference, right? So if you're, whatever, at a baseball team, and you might just run the baseball team, but the numbers that you're talking about might be a lot bigger. We have 6 or 7 different LLCs and operating units So we have a lot more kind of horizontally. The bigness of them maybe, still maybe not as big, obviously, as some of those others from a pure P&L standpoint, dollar cent standpoint. So yeah, like, look, this is, I'm excited that we've gone down this path. When I got here, part of my reasoning for coming to the MLS was I felt that the ingredients for soccer in the United States were finally right. I'd seen some, more of it popping up onto ESPN. I saw in top 10 sports centers, and I watched my son one day. I came home and he was watching Turkey and Iceland play on TV, and I just thought, wow, like, here's this 7-year-old kid, and he's watching these two countries, doesn't know where they are, seeing it on TV, he's playing FIFA gaming. He's got jerseys now that he wants me to purchase from these players that he doesn't know, where they're from. And so I just felt like all of the ubiquity of the sport was starting to really kind of be there, be ready, the ingredients were ready. Meanwhile, the youth soccer side, the sophistication, I think that's happened there, the facilities, the coaches, that's all, much better than it was, again, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So I just felt like it was ready for success. What I didn't anticipate was probably the last 10 years is the power and influence of the various owners coming into the league and themselves helping to fuel the league. And a lot of them have come from other leagues, right? NFL, NHL, NBA, whatever leagues, they're helping to fuel the league. So that's been, I think, really fantastic for us as a, both locally at the union level, big picture MLS enterprise has been great. And, we have these opportunities now with, for growth between World Cup, Club World Cup just came. And I think we're at a really neat, unique inflection point, right? Of, trying to figure out, okay, how do we now really truly double fan base? What does that look like to double a fan base? And there's a lot of people looking at a whole bunch of different things. You've probably heard a lot of discussions around the calendar and would we move from a schedule that is an annual calendar to a FIFA calendar? Looking at different playoff type concepts. I think the idea being that typically when it comes to playoffs, that's a really good time to capture audience, the NHL, I think, does it really well, where maybe during the year, not a huge audience game by game, but when it gets to the playoffs, it seems to capture a lot of eyeballs and attention. So we need to be thinking about, like, how do our playoffs resonate? How does that capture more of the fan base? So that's a long way of me saying I think we're at a really unique time for the league to grow and really studying, what does, from a consumer behavior standpoint, what does it look like to grow? In fact, I was talking to some folks today because we have a pretty unique summer internship process that our interns go through, and they get assigned different projects to work on. And, this was one of them, which was, for young kids, map their journey, their sports journey, and what happens if they don't become a fan. Why did they choose another sport? Why did they start rooting for another sport? And kind of map that journey and come back to us and tell us, what are some of the learnings? What are some of the feedback that you're seeing? And one of the pieces of feedback today, and it's not really surprising, I guess, but they said, hey, we're talking to a bunch of kids, and the older side of that kid age group, which was like around 13 that they were talking to, said, some of the other sports like football and baseball, and there's just more scoring. So when you have a 1-0 game or a 0-0 game, it's just, it's like it just misses a little bit compared to the excitement, because every one of those scores in an MLS game and a union game is a high five, it's dupes, it's smoke and cheers and tifo waving and excitement and fireworks, and like, that's awesome. But when you only get one of those a game for a 13-year-old kid, it's a little right? So I thought that was a really interesting observation. And again, like if you look at what the NFL has done, purposely, not purposely, whatever, but they've obviously made it tougher on defenses, more scoring, more excitement, I guess you could say, because of the result of that. And so, I don't think what I'm saying is, too, I guess, profound that, hey, probably more scoring maybe it leads to more eyeballs. So we're really trying to study, like, where are the connection points? Another piece for us that I think is a little bit different than an NFL environment is the way to someone's heart in soccer seems to be come to our game, have an amazing experience. Like almost everybody comes to Subaru Park in any stadium inside the MLS. Like it's a pretty cool, pretty unique experience. And I think when people leave here, they're like, that was really fun. That was good. And it's very unique with the, in our case, Sons of Ben supporters groups and cheers and chants and TIFO. And it's a very organic type experience where maybe comparing it to like an NBA, there's just lots of synthetics, to it, more, not quite as organic with, the different stuff that has to get pumped in and music constantly. So it's a really neat experience. And so we know we get a good grade from that perspective. And so it's a little bit like, okay, the NFL experience though, so is a little bit more TV first, I'd say, or a familial pass down, a family member who's a big fan of the Eagles and they pass it down, and 6-year-old, 7-year-old is wearing green because they were told to, and they're maybe on a Sunday, they know that there's 6-7 people in their house and they're high-fiving and they're singing a chant, a Eagles fight song, and like, so almost like a different start to the fan journey, it feels like. Whereas ours seems to be more coming to the game. So we're trying to think through things like that and what does that look like, right? So yeah.
Is that something that, I recently heard Commissioner Garber talk about the Apple deal and the reason behind that, and what, his belief is, how well it's going right now. I mean, does that affect you at the club level as well?
Yeah, I mean, any media rights deal is going to affect us, not just financially, but from a fan growth standpoint. Because at the end of the day, fans are a fan of the team, and more so than they are a fan of a league, right? And I say that not just for MLS. I'll say that for NFL or anybody. Like you root for a team. You're not rooting for the NFL, right? You're rooting for Buffalo Bills, right? So I think that's similar here. So
you had to throw the Bills in there, right?
I know. So to the extent that there's any sort of media rights deal or media rights change, not just from a financial standpoint, but from a pure fan growth standpoint, 100%, it impacts the team. I think in this case with Apple, I think there's a lot of promise in hooking, partnering with one of the more iconic brands globally, quite frankly, a company that knows how to do products pretty well. And so it's been a good partnership. And, I think collectively between MLS and Apple trying to figure out, okay, we're kind of past the step one, right? The first innings of it. Like what do the next innings start to look like? Maybe I shouldn't use baseball terminology or on a soccer podcast, but we're past the first couple of minutes from kick. So we need to figure out how we continue to grow, to be a great partner, by both us to them and them to us. And the media, to me, the game broadcast is a big component to growing our fan base. So that's important.
Well, Tim, it's been awesome having you here on our 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show. And, I'm sorry it took so long to have you on, but we won't wait too long to have you back. And, it really is an exciting time for you, for the team itself. I mean, you guys are having a hell of a year from a MLS perspective. I mean, we got an unbelievable World Cup year coming up, and you and the ownership and all the people involved you guys just do the right thing. And just being a Philly guy, I appreciate that, and appreciate all the things that you do, and just wish you a lot of luck, and hopefully you guys you'll bring the cup home this year.
I hope so. I certainly hope so. So a lot of people rowing in the right direction right now, and winning's hard in any sport. Winning's really hard. So when you can start to do what we've done, we're thankful for it, and hopefully we can continue in the playoffs, and we'll see what happens. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, it'd be good for you on the business side of things too. It'll help you a little bit, right?
100%.
Not a bad thing. So yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate you coming on the show, and I'll have you back soon.
Yeah. Thank you.
On behalf of the entire 76 Capital team, thank you for joining us for this edition of our Sports Leadership Show. Please remember to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast network or on the 76 Capital website. You can also explore the hundreds of episodes we've produced over the past several years on those same networks. And as always, go out there and make it happen.